Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the Soldier Son trilogy by Robin Hobb. So I know a lot of people have read and really loved The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, me included. I have a whole shelf of it behind me, but I don't often see people talking about the Soldier Son trilogy. And actually, when I do, I often saw them saying not so great things. The average rating on Goodreads is significantly lower than The Realm of the Elderlings. And I'd kind of heard that there were a lot of problems or like some kind of problematic element to be aware of in the series, and the way that people talked about it, I thought it was going to be something really bad. So I went into the series with trepidation. In fact, the only reason I really picked it up is because I got the second and third books in the trilogy from book fairs, or I don't really remember, maybe free little libraries even. So I got these for very cheap. I do love Robin Hobb. I've loved a lot of stuff, including books outside of The Realm of the Elderlings that she published as Megan Lindholm. So even though I was a little bit worried, I also thought, it's Robin Hobb, it's got to be great, right? And to be honest, I'm really glad that I did go into it, because I ended up really loving this series, and I definitely think it is worth the read. This was published after the 20-man trilogy, but before the Rainwell Chronicles, so kind of right in the middle of The Realm of the Elderlings. And I kind of wonder if Robin Hobb's plan at that point was to go off and write a bunch of different things, and then she only came back to The Realm of the Elderlings because people weren't as receptive to this. Anyway, the Soldier Son trilogy, I need to just stop holding it up all the time because these books are too heavy. I'll put them over there. The Soldier Son trilogy is like an alternate colonial America. We have the Gurneyans who have come into this land and are taking over from the Plains people. The Plains people do have some ability to do magic. However, that ability is taken away by iron, which is why the Gurneyans have been as successful as they have. But there are also these people who live in the forest to the north that the Plains people have also been struggling against, and they have their own kind of magic. So there's kind of three different groups of people involved, and primarily we're following this young boy named Navarre, who is the second son of a second son. So in this world, or amongst the Gurneyans, sons are given different roles depending on their birth order. So the first son is the heir and the leader of the house. The second son is always a soldier. The third son is always a priest. I think there's more roles if you happen to have more boys than that. And women don't really seem to have much role at all, other than just supporting their husband, which is kind of addressed in the story, and I do like those bits. But anyway, Navarre really wants to do a good job of being a soldier son. And in fact, his father was someone who really supported the king in difficult times, and so has been raised to be a lord himself. And so because of that, he gets to go to this school for lords' soldier sons, and there's a big expectation that he is going to become an officer in the army. And again, Navarre really wants to do a good job of this. Through the whole book, he is very earnest. He always wants to do his best. He wants to do the right thing. And sometimes that can be very frustrating. So my first comparison to The Realm of the Elderlings would be to compare Navarre to Fitz. I think both of them, you're following them from quite a young age through to when they're in kind of their young adult stage of life. I think that the first Fitz, or first Realm of the Elderlings trilogy, is probably very similar in the age range that it follows as what the Soldier Son trilogy does, and both of them are at times very infuriating because they insist on doing what they think is right, even when you can see that they're doing something very stupid. So if you like Fitz in The Realm of the Elderlings, I think you could also like the Soldier Son trilogy. Potentially, if you find Fitz very annoying, you might also find Navarre very annoying. But also, like Fitz, things often go terribly wrong for Navarre, especially in the second book is when things just start to like fall apart, and every time he tries to get his life back together, it falls apart again, and it was just heartbreaking to read. I think Robin Hobb always does such a great job of making you feel like you're living this life with the characters, and so then even if you find them infuriating, you kind of want them to succeed and you want them to do well, and it's so hard to read, and it means you really feel that emotional journey as everything goes wrong for them. So like with The Realm of the Elderlings, the books can be very slow paced, they're very character focused, the character building is amazing. You will hate characters, you will love characters, and like every character feels like they're fully fleshed out. I will say, if you do find these books particularly slow, I have always read them via the audiobooks, and I have seen criticisms of the audiobooks, but I think they're worth a go because I really enjoyed them. And it just means in those slower parts you don't have to like push yourself to get through them. You just can kind of go with the flow. I also think, like, even though these books are very slow, a lot of the stuff that you might initially think is filler, often it does all turn out to be somewhat relevant. It's either there for character building, or eventually something happens in the plot that makes you realize that it was important. There were a lot of things at the beginning of this book that I kind of like put a pin in, like, this is gonna be something later on in the book, and like quite far into the series I would be like, is anything ever going to happen with that, or was it a waste of time? But then something would happen. It would turn out that it was important after all. And so in that way, it was very clever. And I especially liked how Robin Hobb really tied the themes into the different characters' stories and how the magic worked as well. The only thing I would say is the very ending, there's kind of a quite a satisfying ending, and then there was a little final bit that I felt like was just giving Navarre too much of a happy ending almost, and it felt a little bit fan servicey to me, and I still struggle with how I think that felt with the bigger themes and the bigger message of the book. Although I say message, I also think what Robin Hobb does a lot with themes is just introduce you to different ways of thinking about things, and doesn't necessarily tell you how to actually think about things. Like, it's not lecturing you, it's just opening you up to like different perspectives and different ways of thinking about things, which I think when you're dealing with something complex, somewhat complex, like colonization, that's a much better way to approach it, which I think leads us to talk about some of the themes of this book. And a lot of the themes that this book are dealing with, I think, can be somewhat triggering for different people as well. And I suspect that is why this book has struggled to get the traction that The Realm of the Elderlings got, because a lot of the topics that it's looking into are somewhat more controversial in terms of what is the actual correct way of looking at things. So firstly, of course, this is a book about colonization, and so of course we have a lot of racism. Right near the beginning, Navarre's father especially goes on some quite racist rants that I felt quite uncomfortable reading, and definitely didn't make me feel favorably about his father, even though in other ways his father is represented as a very like respectable soldier. So that contrast was interesting. And there's a lot of times throughout this book that you are introduced to the other races of people, the Plains people and the Spec, and there's a lot of assumptions made about them that often you discover later aren't entirely true, or just that there have been a lot of assumptions made. And also when Navarre is in the school, I particularly remember this moment where one of the teachers is like, well, they're just a primitive race and we really need to be giving them this information because otherwise they'll just continue being primitive. And it kind of shows throughout later parts of the book how arrogant that thinking is, and that it really comes with the assumption that the Gurnean way of doing things is the correct way of doing things. So in some ways I liked the representation of the Indigenous people of this land. I will say that it might not be flawless, and I'm probably not the best person to judge that. I was definitely very frustrated with the very first scene of the book, where we meet this young girl who is half Gurnean and half Plains people, and basically is sexually harassed, and Navarre as a young boy is like a witness to this. And when I read that, I thought that this woman, or this young girl, was going to be a main character in the story, but I'm pretty sure we never find out anything about her again, which to me made me a little bit frustrated that what was presented to her didn't kind of take us anywhere. But I can also see another big theme in this book, or this series, is about this mistreatment of women, and this is probably the part of the book series that I felt the most uncomfortable with, because Navarre is often very judgmental about women that he considers to be loose women and towards prostitutes. And while the women in his life do kind of open his eyes to some elements of that, he's still endlessly infuriating about it. But probably the best character in this series is his cousin Epony. She, right from the start, says to him, I don't want to just be a wife, I want to live my own life, I want to have my own achievements. And he's like, wow, I never thought that a woman would want that. And it really makes him think about this woman that he is hoping to marry. Like, he always just thought that she must be so excited that she gets to marry him and be the wife of a soldier. And suddenly he's like, oh, maybe she has her own ideas and her own dreams of what she wants her life to be. So he's kind of an idiot, but also probably a realistic idiot. You know, there are many men to whom these things are a surprise. But it is definitely worth knowing when you go into this series that there is a fair amount of like mistreatment of women and some very difficult parts to read regarding that. I don't want to spoil it, but another really difficult theme that this book talks about is fat phobia. So in the first book, when Navar goes to school, one of his schoolmates that he is somewhat good friends with is a larger boy, and there is a lot of prejudice against Gord because of this. His name is Gord, and he talks a lot about how nothing he does really changes, just his general natural makeup, and none of the other boys really believe him. So I think some people aren't very happy with the fat phobia in this book, and it is really difficult to read, but I also think it's actually a very accurate representation. And I think if you have never struggled with your weight or with any kind of fat phobia, this would be a good book to read to see what it can be like to go through that. Because in the first book, we have Gord going through it. In the second book, Navar himself has some struggles with his weight. I, again, don't want to spoil things too much, but just the way that people treat him as a result was one of these heartbreaking things. But it was also so difficult to read because I know that is exactly what so many people go through. And so even though it can be hard to read, I think for the awareness of it, it's still really important. And I think even though there is kind of this magical element to it, it's still a very accurate representation. Like a horrible representation, it shouldn't be like that. But I still think like a really good, true representation. And I actually appreciated that. I see a lot of books that are body positive, and I love that. And actually, I don't think this is necessarily not body positive, but it definitely shows a lot of horrible fat phobic experiences. Lastly, probably the least of the trigger warnings in this book would be that there is a plague throughout the story. Obviously, a lot of us coming out of COVID-19 are somewhat sensitive about that, and this plague is pretty awful and is also a pretty key part of the story. And for all of these themes that the book deals with, I think it just links in so well with the magic. So the idea with the magic, Robin Hobb always does magic so differently from many other authors that I read. So the idea of this magic is it's not a magic that you can learn to control. The magic has a will of its own, and you are really there to do what the magic wants you to do, and you can maybe fight against it. But ultimately, it's probably in your best interest to do what the magic wants you to do. And so for me, the magic really represented like a lack of control. And I think a lack of control really feeds so well into all of these themes, because often as an individual, we don't really have control over any of these kind of things. It fit really well into the fat phobia weight issues topic. It also actually fit really well into the whole idea of colonization that we're exploring here, that often you as an individual can't really do much, but that the small things that you do can lead to a bigger, better outcome, maybe. But also at the same time, it says a lot about how there aren't any easy answers for any of these themes, but it's okay because you don't have to be the full solution. Anyway, the summary is, I really loved the Soldier Son trilogy, and it makes me so sad that the average rating is so much lower than The Realm of the Elderlings, because I really do think that a lot of people that love The Realm of the Elderlings could also love Soldier Son. Probably it's worth going in knowing about some of these themes and being a little bit prepared, but definitely worth the read in my opinion. If you have read the Soldier Son trilogy, I would love to chat with you about it down in the comments, especially if you disagree with me or have any other ideas. Or also let me know if you are interested in reading the trilogy, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.